The notification popped up on my phone while I was running lines in our cramped apartment kitchen, coffee growing cold in my favorite mug, the one that read, "World's Okayest Actor." Sarah's Instagram story. A video of her at some indie concert downtown, swaying to music I didn't recognize. Captioned, "Forgot I'm happily married and pregnant for a second." I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, my brain processing what I was seeing. My wife of 6 years, supposedly home with morning sickness, was instead grinding against some hipster at a concert she'd never mentioned. The pregnancy we'd announced to our families just last week. The pregnancy that had made me turn down a touring production of Hamlet. I typed back, "Let me help you forget permanently." Then I did something I'd never done in my life. Something that would make my mother clutch her pearls and my therapist schedule an emergency session. I called a locksmith. "How fast can you change all the locks on a 2-bedroom apartment?" I asked, already pulling Sarah's clothes from our shared dresser. "Emergency rate gets you service in an hour," the guy said. "That'll be $300. Make it $200 and I'll throw in theater tickets. Deal." While I waited, I methodically packed Sarah's belongings into the matching luggage set her mother had given us for our honeymoon. Every folded sweater felt like closing a chapter. Every pair of shoes was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I found myself narrating the process in my head like I was performing a monologue. Here lies Sarah's collection of vintage band t-shirts she bought at Urban Outfitters. Here lies the yoga pants she claimed made her feel spiritual, but mostly made her feel superior to people who shopped at Target. The locksmith arrived exactly when promised, a gruff guy named Pete who didn't ask questions when he saw the suitcases by the door. I tipped him an extra $50 and asked him to wait while I arranged the luggage on our front porch like a still life titled, "Consequences of Your Actions." I took a photo. The composition was actually quite good. The late afternoon light casting dramatic shadows across the burgundy suitcases, our apartment number clearly visible in the background. I sent it to Sarah with no caption. Sometimes the image speaks for itself. My phone rang within minutes. "What the heck is this?" Sarah's voice was shrill, cutting through what sounded like traffic noise. "Art," I said, settling into my reading chair, now officially my reading chair. "I call it domestic still life with betrayal." "Don't be dramatic, David. This is ridiculous. Open the door." "Can't. New locks." Funny thing about marriage, turns out till death do us part, doesn't include unless you decide to dry hump strangers at concerts while pretending to have morning sickness. You're being insane. That video was nothing. I was just what? Practicing for your audition as a single woman? Because, congratulations, you got the part. I could hear her fumbling with keys, the frustrated jingle of metal against metal. "These don't work." "That's the point of changing locks, Sarah. It's like a magic trick, except instead of making a rabbit disappear, I made a cheating wife disappear." "I wasn't cheating. God, you're so paranoid. It was just dancing." "Right. And I'm sure the pregnancy is just acting too." The silence stretched long enough for me to wonder if she'd hung up. Then, "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Nothing at all. Enjoy your suitcases. I hear the weather's nice for homeless people this time of year." I hung up and immediately called my best friend Marcus, who answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting for drama to unfold. "Please tell me you did something spectacularly stupid," Marcus said by way of greeting. "I changed the locks and put her stuff on the porch." "Holy crap, you actually grew a backbone. How does it feel?" "Like I'm about to throw up, or like I'm about to give the performance of my life. I can't tell which." "Both, probably. You want me to come over? I've got beer and terrible advice. Rain check. I need to process this alone for a bit." But I didn't process it alone. I paced our apartment, my apartment, like I was blocking a scene. Kitchen to living room to bedroom and back, each circuit revealing new evidence of Sarah's deception. The pregnancy test in the bathroom trash that I suddenly realized was probably fake. The receipts for clothes and sizes she hadn't worn since college. The way she'd been staying late at the theater for rehearsals that didn't match the production schedule I knew by heart. Sarah was a director at the Riverside Theater, the same place where I'd been performing for 8 years. We'd met during a production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? She was assistant directing. I was playing Nick. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were now living out our own version of a bitter marriage drama. My phone buzzed with a text from my understudy, Jake. "Heard about you and Sarah. You okay, man?" That stopped me mid-pace. Jake was 28, 6'2", and had the kind of effortless charm that made casting directors weak in the knees. He'd been understudying my roles for 2 years, always eager, always just a little too interested in when I might miss rehearsals. I stared at his message for a long time. How had he heard? Sarah and I hadn't told anyone about our fight. Unless he already knew. The pieces clicked together like a well-constructed plot twist. Jake's sudden interest in Sarah's directing projects. The way they'd developed their own shorthand during rehearsals. How Sarah had started coming home smelling like that pretentious cologne Jake wore. Something with bergamot that cost more than most actors made in a week. My phone rang again. Sarah, David, please, can we just talk about this like adults? Adults don't lie about being pregnant to cover up affairs. I'm not having an affair. Then why does Jake know about our fight? The silence was deafening. I could practically hear her scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't incriminate her further. Someone must have seen the suitcases. Try again, and this time, maybe workshop the lie a little better. Your delivery is flat. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference, though I understand how you might not recognize honesty anymore. Fine, yes, Jake and I, we've gotten close, but it's not what you think. Really? Because I think you've been sleeping with my understudy while I've been home learning lines for a play that's supposed to showcase our marriage's stability. I think you faked a pregnancy to keep me from taking the Hamlet tour. And I think you've been using our apartment as your personal rehearsal space for infidelity. How's my thinking so far? David, save it for your next performance. Speaking of which, I'll see you at rehearsal tomorrow. Should be interesting. I hung up and immediately regretted it. Not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I'd just telegraphed my next move. Sarah would have 12 hours to prepare her counterattack. But then again, so would I. I spent the evening doing something I hadn't done in years. I read through the entire script of our current production, The Tempest, looking for opportunities. Shakespeare was full of betrayal and revenge. Maybe it was time for some method acting. The next morning, I arrived at the theater early. The Riverside was a converted warehouse from the 1920s, all exposed brick and industrial lighting that made everything feel dramatic even when you were just checking your email. I loved the place. The smell of sawdust and grease paint, the way sound carried through the cavernous space, the maze of dressing rooms and storage areas where you could disappear for hours. I made coffee in the tiny break room and settled in to watch the morning unfold. Sarah arrived at her usual time, looking like she'd slept in her car. Jake showed up 20 minutes later, which was unusual since he was typically early for everything. They didn't acknowledge each other, but there was a tension between them that you could feel from the cheap seats. I stayed in the shadows, observing. 8 years of marriage had taught me to read Sarah's body language like sheet music. The way she held her shoulders when she was stressed, how she touched her hair when she was lying, the particular smile she used when she was trying to manipulate someone. She was doing all three. Rehearsal started at 10. We were working on Act 4, the scene where Prospero confronts those who betrayed him. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a prop sword. David, Sarah called from the director's table, her voice artificially bright. Can we run your speech from the top? I want to work on the emotional arc. I took center stage, looking directly at her. Which emotional arc? The betrayal, the anger, the desire for revenge. All of it. Make us feel Prospero's pain. Oh, I'll make you feel it. I launched into the monologue. But instead of Prospero's words, I found myself channeling every ounce of rage and betrayal I'd felt in the past 24 hours. The other actors stopped what they were doing to watch. Even Jake, who was supposed to be running lines in the corner, couldn't look away. But this rough magic I hear abjure, I said, staring directly at Sarah. I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. The silence that followed was electric. Sarah's face had gone pale. That was, she started. Honest, I finished. Maybe too honest. Jake cleared his throat. Should we run the next scene? I turned to look at him for the first time that morning. Actually, Jake, I've been thinking. Maybe you should run my scenes today, in case I need to step away from the production. What? Why would you? Personal reasons, I'm sure you understand. You seem to understand a lot about my personal life lately. The color drained from his face. Sarah stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. David, can I see you privately? Actually, I think we've had enough private conversations. From now on, everything's public. Transparency, Like a marriage should be. I walked off the stage, leaving them both standing there like actors who'd forgotten their lines. The rest of the day passed in a blur of awkward encounters and whispered conversations. Word was spreading through the theater community, it always did. By evening, I'd received texts from half a dozen actor friends, all wanting to know what was happening. I ignored them all and went home to my empty apartment. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I started planning revenge like it was a theatrical production. I made lists. I drew diagrams. I researched legal precedents for breaking leases and dividing assets. But most importantly, I started thinking like a director. If this was going to be a performance, it was going to be the best single performance of my career. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Sarah stayed with her sister, Jake avoided me at the theater, and I threw myself into research. Not just legal research, character research. I studied every revenge plot from Hamlet to the Count of Monte Cristo. I analyzed the psychology of betrayal and the art of public humiliation. I also started documenting everything. Not with hidden cameras or illegal surveillance, but with the careful observation skills I developed as an actor. I noted when Sarah and Jake arrived at the theater, when they left, who they talked to. I listened to gossip from the other actors and crew members. I pieced together a timeline of their affair that went back months. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't just been sleeping together. They'd been planning for me to take the Hamlet tour so they could have the apartment to themselves. Planning for Sarah to direct Jake in the lead role of our spring production. Planning a future that didn't include me. The fake pregnancy was the masterstroke. It kept me home, kept me committed, and kept me from asking too many questions about why Sarah was suddenly working such long hours. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the locksmith had changed my life along with my locks, I put the first phase of my plan into action. I arrived at the theater early and went straight to the prop room. The Riverside had been accumulating props for decades, everything from medieval swords to modern furniture. I found what I was looking for in a box labeled Miscellaneous, a small digital recorder that had been used in a production of Oleanna 2 years ago. I tested it. Still worked. Then I went to the break room and waited. Sarah and Jake arrived within minutes of each other as they had every day that week. They went straight to Sarah's office, closing the door behind them. But the walls in the converted warehouse were thin and sound carried in unexpected ways. I positioned myself in the adjacent storage room and turned on the recorder. "We need to talk about David," Sarah's voice came through clearly. "What about him?" "He's suspicious. Yesterday he kept staring at us during rehearsal. Maybe because you kicked him out of his own apartment. That was necessary. He was getting too close to figuring things out. Sarah, this is insane. We should just tell him the truth." "The truth? The truth is that you're a better actor than he'll ever be, and I'm tired of watching him coast on mediocrity. The truth is that we're good together and he's holding both of us back." "What about the pregnancy thing? What about it? You can't fake being pregnant forever." "I'm not faking it forever. I'll have a miscarriage in a few weeks. Stress from the divorce, very tragic, very convenient." I stopped the recording. I had what I needed, but I didn't stop there. Over the next week, I collected more evidence. Not through illegal means, but through the simple act of paying attention. I noticed that Jake's car was parked outside Sarah's sister's house on Tuesday night. I observed them having lunch together at the cafe across from the theater, holding hands under the table. I watched Sarah lie to the cast about why I'd been missing rehearsals. Each piece of evidence was like a puzzle piece, and I was building a picture that would be impossible to deny. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed a stage. The Riverside Theater held a monthly fundraising event called Spotlight Night, where local actors performed scenes from classic plays for donors and community members. It was always well attended, always recorded for the theater's social media, and always featured a speech from the artistic director about the importance of supporting local theater. This month's theme was love and betrayal in classic literature. Perfect. I signed up to perform Iago's soliloquy from Othello, the speech where he outlines his plan to destroy the man who trusted him. The irony was so perfect it felt like destiny. But that wasn't the real performance I was planning. 2 days before Spotlight Night, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was cleaning out the last of Sarah's belongings, things she'd missed when I packed her suitcases, when I found a notebook wedged behind our bedroom dresser. It was Sarah's handwriting, but not the careful script she used for directing notes. This was hurried, emotional stream of consciousness writing. A diary. I opened it to a random page and immediately wished I hadn't. David looked so happy when I told him about the pregnancy. It almost made me feel guilty. Almost. But Jake is right, we can't keep living this lie forever. David's career is going nowhere, and he's dragging me down with him. After the spring production, when Jake gets the recognition he deserves, we'll make our move. David will be devastated, but he'll get over it. He always does. I flipped to another entry. Jake thinks we should tell David the truth, but he doesn't understand how fragile David's ego is. The man still thinks he's going to be discovered at 34. It's pathetic. At least this way, he'll think the divorce is about the miscarriage, not about his failures as an actor and a husband. And another, David made dinner tonight and kept talking about baby names. I wanted to scream. How can someone be so oblivious? Jake would never be this naive. Jake sees the world as it really is. I read the entire notebook in one sitting, each entry a fresh knife twist. The affair had been going on for 4 months. They'd been planning to leave me for 2. The pregnancy was fake from the beginning, designed to keep me stable while they figured out their exit strategy. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the condescension. The way Sarah wrote about me like I was a child who needed to be managed rather than a husband who deserved honesty. That night, I rewrote my entire plan. Spotlight night was held in the theater's main auditorium, a beautiful space with red velvet seats and a stage that had hosted everyone from community theater actors to Broadway touring companies. The audience was a mix of regular donors, local arts supporters, and theater people from around the region. Sarah was there, of course, in her role as a director. Jake was there too, scheduled to perform a scene from Romeo and Juliet with one of the local actresses. They sat 3 rows apart, maintaining the fiction that they were just colleagues. I was scheduled to go on third after a scene from The Glass Menagerie and before Jake's Romeo. Perfect timing. I watched the first 2 performances from backstage, my heart hammering like it did before every opening night. But this wasn't just opening night. This was closing night, final performance, last curtain call, all rolled into one. When my name was announced, I walked onto the stage with confidence I hadn't felt in years. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see the audience clearly, but I knew exactly where Sarah and Jake were sitting. I started with Iago's soliloquy, just as I'd rehearsed. And what's he then that says I play the villain? When this advice is free, I give an honest, but halfway through I stopped. Actually, I said, stepping out of character and addressing the audience directly, I'd like to try something different tonight, something more contemporary. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the theater's sound system, a trick I'd learned from years of working with the tech crew. You see, I continued, I've been thinking a lot about betrayal lately, about trust, about what happens when the people closest to you decide to rewrite your story without telling you. I could see Sarah in the 3rd row now, her face pale in the stage lights. Jake had gone rigid in his seat. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, is here tonight. So is the man she's been sleeping with for the past 4 months. They thought they were very clever, very discreet. They thought I was too stupid to figure it out. A murmur ran through the audience. This wasn't part of the program. But here's the thing about actors. We're professional observers. We notice things. Like when someone claims to have morning sickness but never actually throws up. Like when your understudy suddenly knows your schedule better than you do. Like when your wife starts working late on a production that doesn't exist. I pressed play on my phone. Sarah's voice filled the auditorium. The truth is that you're a better actor than he'll ever be, and I'm tired of watching him coast on mediocrity. The audience was dead silent now. I could see Sarah starting to stand, but Jake grabbed her arm, pulling her back down. That's my wife, I announced cheerfully, talking about me to her lover. But wait, there's more. I skipped it to another recording. I'll have a miscarriage in a few weeks. Stress from the divorce. Very tragic, very convenient. Now Sarah was on her feet, pushing past other audience members toward the aisle. But I wasn't done. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the artistic director of our beloved Riverside Theater, Sarah Mitchell, and her leading man, Jake Harrison, in their acclaimed performance of How to Destroy a Marriage in 4 Easy Steps. Sarah had reached the back of the theater, but instead of leaving, she turned around. You bastard! She shouted, her voice carrying clearly in the acoustic space. You have no right! No right! I laughed, and it came out darker than I intended. I have no right to tell the truth about my own life? About my own marriage? About my own wife's fake pregnancy? The phrase fake pregnancy rippled through the audience like a shockwave. These were people who'd congratulated us just weeks ago, who'd been planning baby showers and offering parenting advice. Jake stood up now too, his face red with anger or embarrassment or both. David, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? Because I feel like I'm finally being honest for the first time in months. Tell me, Jake, when exactly did you decide to sleep with my wife? Was it before or after you started understudying my roles? This is insane, Jake said, but his voice cracked on the words. What's insane is thinking you could gaslight me indefinitely. What's insane is faking a pregnancy to manipulate someone. What's insane is planning someone's entire future behind their back. I pulled out Sarah's diary and held it up. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from the source. I opened to a page I'd bookmarked and read aloud. David's career is going nowhere, and he's dragging me down with him. After the spring production, when Jake gets the recognition he deserves, we'll make our move. Sarah started moving toward the stage, her face twisted with rage. Give me that. That's private. Privacy is for people who don't fake pregnancies and plan divorces in secret. Privacy is for people who don't humiliate their spouses in front of entire communities. She reached the edge of the stage just as Jake caught up with her. They stood there, looking up at me. And for a moment, the three of us formed a perfect tableau. The betrayed husband, the cheating wife, and the ambitious understudy. You want to know what's really crazy? I said, addressing the audience again. They actually thought they were the good guys in this story. They thought I was too stupid to deserve the truth. They thought I was too weak to handle it. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at them. But here's what they didn't count on. I'm an actor, and actors know that every story needs a good ending. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Sarah, these are divorce papers. I'm citing adultery, fraud, and emotional misuse. Jake, these are copies of every recording I made, every piece of evidence I collected, and a formal complaint to the theater's board about your unprofessional conduct. I dropped both envelopes at their feet. And for my final trick, I walked back to center stage and picked up a prop bucket that I'd placed there earlier, one filled with the theater stage liquid we used for our production of Macbeth. This is for every lie you told, every night you came home smelling like him, every time you made me feel crazy for trusting my own instincts. I dumped the entire bucket over the edge of the stage. Sarah screamed as the red liquid splashed across her white dress. Jake jumped backwards, slipping on the now slick floor and landing hard on his back. The audience erupted. Some people were laughing, others were gasping, a few were applauding. Someone was definitely recording with their phone. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, taking a bow, that concludes tonight's performance of The Tempest, a modern adaptation. Thank you for your attention, your support, and your witness. I walked off the stage to the sound of chaos. Shouting, applause, the scraping of chairs as people stood to get a better look at the carnage below. Backstage, I could hear Sarah screaming at Jake, Jake screaming at the theater staff, and what sounded like security guards trying to restore order. But I didn't stick around to watch the aftermath. I walked out the stage door into the cool night air, got in my car, and drove home to my empty apartment. My clean, honest, lock-changed apartment where no one was lying to me about anything. My phone was buzzing with calls and texts, but I ignored them all. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in my reading chair, and opened a new script I'd been meaning to look at. A one-man show about starting over. 3 hours later, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers. Mr. Mitchell, we need to ask you some questions about tonight's incident at the theater. I opened the door and invited them in. They were both young, probably around Jake's age, and they looked more amused than concerned. Sir, we had reports of assault, harassment, and public disturbance, the taller one said, consulting his notebook. All true, I said. Would you like some coffee? They exchanged glances. Sir, did you throw stage liquid on your wife and her friend? I did. It's theater-safe stage liquid, corn syrup and food coloring. Completely harmless. I can show you the recipe if you'd like. And did you play recordings of private conversations without consent? I played recordings of conversations that took place in public spaces where I had every right to be. The theater break room, specifically. No expectation of privacy there. The shorter officer spoke up. What about the inappropriate behavior allegations? I told the truth about my marriage at a public event where I was invited to perform. Everything I said was factually accurate and can be verified. I have documentation. They asked a few more questions, took some notes, And then the taller officer closed his notebook. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to be honest with you. Your wife and her friend are pretty upset, but they don't really have a case. Public humiliation isn't a crime if you're telling the truth, and the staged liquid thing, well, it's weird, but it's not assault. However, the shorter one added, I'd strongly recommend you avoid contact with both of them for the foreseeable future. The situation is volatile enough without adding fuel to the fire. After they left, I sat back down with my wine and my script. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of my upstairs neighbor's television and the distant hum of traffic. For the first time in months, I felt peaceful. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I deleted them all without reading them and made myself breakfast. Eggs Benedict, because I'd never liked Eggs Benedict, but Sarah had insisted on making it every Sunday for 6 years. It was delicious. Around noon, Marcus showed up with coffee and bagels and the biggest grin I'd ever seen. You magnificent bastard, he said, pushing past me into the apartment. You actually did it. You actually burned it all down. I told the truth, that's all. That's all. David, you're a legend. The video is everywhere. Hashtag fake pregnancy revenge is trending on Twitter. Someone made a TikTok compilation set to before he cheats. I hadn't thought about social media. In the age of smartphones, nothing stayed private. How bad is it? For you? It's great. You're the wronged husband who stood up for himself. Very sympathetic character. For Sarah and Jake, well, let's just say their reputations are more dead than a Shakespearean tragedy. Marcus showed me his phone. The video was grainy and shot from the back of the auditorium, but you could hear everything clearly. Sarah's voice admitting to the fake pregnancy. My speech about betrayal and truth. The moment I dumped the stage liquid. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. This man is a hero. Fake pregnancy? That's psychopath behavior. The understudy getting covered in that stuff is chef's kiss. Plot twist. He's actually a better actor than we thought. There's more, Marcus said, scrolling through his phone. The theater's board held an emergency meeting this morning. Sarah's been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Jake's been fired outright. Apparently, there were other complaints about his conduct. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. It was over. After months of lies and manipulation and gaslighting, it was finally over. You know what the best part is? Marcus continued. 3 different theaters have already called me asking for your contact information. Apparently, your performance last night convinced some people that you've been seriously underutilized. Are you serious? Dead serious. One of them is the Regional Theater in Chicago. They want you to audition for their fall season. Lead roles, David. Not supporting, not understudy, lead. I sat down heavily in my reading chair. For years, I'd been telling myself that success was just around the corner, that the right opportunity would come along eventually. I'd never imagined it would come as a result of my marriage exploding in public. There's something else, Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious. Sarah's been calling me. She wants to talk to you. No. She says she's sorry. She says she wants to explain. No. She says the pregnancy wasn't completely fake. She thought she might be, but Marcus, I looked at him directly. No. There's nothing she can say that will change what happened. There's no explanation that will make the last 4 months okay. She made her choices and now she gets to live with them. He nodded. I figured you'd say that. But I had to ask. What about Jake? What about him? He's persona non grata in the local theater scene. Word is he's moving back to his parents' place in Ohio. Good. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about practical things. The divorce proceedings, the apartment lease, my upcoming auditions. Normal things, future things. That evening, I went back to the theater. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to see the space where it had all happened. The Riverside was closed for the day, but I had a key. All the long-term actors did for late-night rehearsals and early morning prep. The auditorium was empty and dark, but I could still feel the energy from the night before. I stood on the stage where I'd told the truth for the first time in months and looked out at the seats where my life had changed forever. There was still a faint stain on the floor where the stage liquid had splashed. Someone had tried to clean it, but theatrical stage liquid is designed to be dramatic. It doesn't come out easily. I liked that it was still there. A reminder that some performances can't be undone. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. Please call me. We need to talk. I deleted it and turned off my phone. Instead, I walked to center stage and began reciting Prospero's final speech from The Tempest, the real one this time, But this rough magic I hear abjure. I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound I'll drown my book. My voice echoed in the empty theater, bouncing off the walls and ceiling before fading into silence. Then I walked off the stage, locked the theater behind me, and drove home to start the next act of my life. 3 weeks later, I was in Chicago, rehearsing for the lead role in a production of Long Day's Journey into Night. The director was a woman named Patricia who'd seen the video of my Spotlight Night performance and decided I had the kind of raw honesty that can't be taught. The other actors treated me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. They'd all heard the story, of course. It had become legend in theater circles. The actor who'd exposed his cheating wife and fake pregnancy in the most dramatic way possible. I didn't mind being known for it. Better to be known for standing up for yourself than for being a doormat. On opening night, I got a text from Marcus. Sarah and Jake are officially over. Apparently she blamed him for everything and he couldn't handle the guilt. Also, the divorce papers were finalized this morning. You're officially a free man. I smiled and put my phone away. It was time for places. The performance went perfectly. Every line felt true. Every emotion felt earned. When I took my bow at the end, the audience gave me a standing ovation that lasted for 3 full minutes. Afterward, at the cast party, a young actress named Emma approached me. "That was incredible," she said. "I've never seen anyone inhabit a role like that." "Thank you. Can I ask you something? The story about your ex-wife, is it true, all of it? Every word. And you really dumped stage liquid on them?" "I really did," she laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. "That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard." Romantic? Not the stage liquid part, the truth part, the standing up for yourself part, the refusing to be lied to part. I looked at her, really looked. She was maybe 25, with the kind of bright eyes that suggested she still believed in happy endings. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" she asked. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I'd love to. 6 months later, Emma and I were living together in a sunny apartment near the lake. She was directing a small theater company, and I was preparing for my 3rd lead role since leaving home. We didn't talk about Sarah or Jake or fake pregnancies or revenge. We talked about scripts and opening nights and the future we were building together, honestly, openly, without lies or manipulation or hidden agendas. Sometimes, late at night, when Emma was asleep beside me, I'd think about that moment on the Riverside stage when I'd finally told the truth. The moment when I'd stopped being a victim and started being the protagonist of my own story. It had cost me my marriage, my home, and most of my friends from the old theater. It had been worth every penny. 1 year after Spotlight Night, I got a call from the artistic director of the Riverside Theater. "David, this is Margaret Thompson. I wanted to reach out personally to apologize for everything that happened last year." "No apology necessary, Margaret. There is, actually. We should have seen what was happening. We should have protected you better. Sarah won't be returning to the theater. Ever." "I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask you something. We're planning our season for next year, and we'd love to have you back. As our lead actor. Full creative control, profit sharing, the works." I looked out the window of my Chicago apartment, watching Emma walk up the street with coffee and pastries from our favorite bakery. "Thank you, Margaret, but I'm happy where I am." "I understand, but David, what you did that night, it was brave, and it was necessary. This community is better because of it." After I hung up, Emma came through the door with her arms full of breakfast and her face bright with excitement. "Guess what?" she said, kissing me before I could answer. "The Tribune wants to do a feature story about our theater company. Apparently, someone told them about the brilliant actor I'm dating who isn't afraid to tell the truth. Someone, huh? Someone who may have mentioned that you're the most honest person she's ever met." I pulled her close and kissed her properly. "You know what?" I said. "I think I'm going to like this ending better than the original." And for the first time in years, I meant every word.